Good afternoon. Welcome to the National Pulse. I'm Raheem Kassam, Editor-in-Chief of thenationalpulse.com. And I want to start off this week by talking about something that we're not supposed to talk about. Smartmatic and Dominion. Electronic voting systems that are hitting everybody with legal letters at the moment, trying to scare people into retractions, and some things that are just genuinely not true. Now, I know Fox News has been doing this, I know Newsmax has been doing this, that's their decisions to make. I will not be doing that. And the National Pulse will not be doing that. The National Pulse is sticking by its reporting. And what is our reporting on this? Well, I want to take you to the Newsmax statement that is airing every hour today. I'm going to quote from this. They say since Election Day, guests, attorneys and elected officials have appeared, offering opinions and claims about Smartmatic and Dominion voting systems. Newsmax would like to clarify its news coverage and note it is not reported as true certain claims made about these companies. We have no evidence Dominion uses Smartmatic software or vice versa. No evidence that Dominion or Smartmatic use software or reprogram software that manipulated votes in the 2020 election. Smartmatic has stated its software was only used in the 2020 election in Los Angeles. Dominion has stated its company has no ownership relationship with the House Speaker, Dianne Feinstein, the Clinton family, Hugo Chavez, the government of Venezuela. Neither Dominion nor Smartmatic has any relationship with George Soros. Smartmatic is a U.S. company and not owned by the Venezuelan government, Hugo Chavez, or any foreign official or entity. Just a quick problem with a lot of those clarifications, a lot of that cuckoldry, is that nobody was alleging half of those things, most of those things, in fact. And the ones that were alleged, all right, let me just take you through this real quick. The ones that were alleged and continue to be alleged, such as Dominion uses Smartmatic software or vice versa, I can prove that one. We actually have the legal cases. They're on the National Pulse. You can search for them, where these two companies admit to using each other's software. Huh? Hold on. I'll tell you what. Don't use my words, because you know what? I'll get a nasty legal letter. Why don't we use the words of Smartmatic's own chairman? Can we roll this clip from the Philippines, please?
Philippines after reports that it had violated provisions of the election automated law. Number one, for example, that it was never supposed to be allowed to bid in the 2010 elections because it did not actually own the software. Dominion Voting Systems owned the software. Plus the difficulty which Smartmatic had to put the COMELEC through just in order to access the source code. Issues like that. Your thoughts? People say we should not be subjected to Smartmatic again this time around.
Well, look, I think that's competitors who say that. You know, the fact is, yes, part of our technology is licensed from Dominion, but you tell me a large technology company which isn't using, in part, licenses from other companies, and we have a license for the international use of that particular piece of the technology that we employ. But, you know, we are a manufacturing and technology R&D company. We have hundreds of people who are doing R&D and hundreds more involved in manufacture. These are our systems, and you know, the fact is we are proud of the way we've transformed election performance in the Philippines.
So Mark, let me just cut in there and ask you, the license issued by Dominion for you to use their proprietary software, that is a live license, it's an active license. It has not been revoked.
No.
Okay,
No.
all right, go ahead.
No, so
Thank you, Lord Malloch Brown, chairman of Smartmatic, talking about the license for the software used that belongs to Dominion, used by Smartmatic. So when it says in this clarification or whatever it is from Newsmax, we have no evidence Dominion uses Smartmatic software or vice versa, thenationalpulse.com. Just go ahead and go on that website, and we've done the research for you. And here's the other one. Here's the other one. I'm sorry to be too snarky, because, you know, it's SV Date at the Huffington Post. Shirish, me old mucker. He said, hey, Raheem, here's the clarification for you. You might want to use it. No, I don't want to use it, Shirish. I think you should use our reporting. I know, the Huffington Post, you don't do reporting. I get it. You do op-eds disguised as reporting. thenationalpulse.com. You can use our reporting. It's free for you. Just take it, use it. The other one is neither Dominion nor Smartmatic has any relationship with George Soros. That's a big fat lie. On your screen there was Lord Malloch Brown, a very, very close friend of George Soros. Pretty sure they had some kind of property deal together as well. Lord Malloch Brown's been around, been at the UN, been in all sorts of places. Guess who just got appointed the chairman of the board of George Soros's Open Society Institutes? That would be Lord Malloch Brown. After the election, Lord Malloch Brown. So Smartmatic doesn't have a relationship with George Soros, and Dominion leases its software out to Smartmatic. So they both have a relationship. Let me put it this way. That may be tangential. It may be friendly. I don't care what it is. There were claims made about Russia collusion and all that nonsense, which were 10, 20 steps away. You know, oh, well, you know, Don Jr. once had a glass of Russian vodka, and therefore... But when you can do it 1 or 2 step away between Dominion and George Soros, and between Smartmatic 1 step to George Soros, no, sir, we will not be doing any retractions. We'll be back right after this break. Well, I just had to get that off my chest. And I actually apologize to our in-studio guest for taking up the time, but an impromptu clarification of a clarification was needed. Welcome back to the National Pulse, where, as I said on the very first show we did, we watch the watchers. I want to bring in somebody else who is keen-eyed and always watching the watchers, always amazing in his hot takes. Steve Cortez, senior advisor to the Trump campaign, joins us in studio. You know, we much prefer you in studio. The full gravity of Steve Cortez is with us here. Steve, you've written this amazing article. As always, I'm not just blowing smoke. I think your articles are always, you always seem to manage to find the weak chink in the enemy's armor, right? And this was no different. We can throw it to the laptop here so the audience can get a view of what I'm looking at here. It's called "If Biden Was Sure of His Victory, He'd Welcome Transparency." Guys,
right.
Can we get this on screen? I know it's a busy day in the production room today. So walk us through this, because I read the headline and the first line of this, and I just thought, yep, that's true. Just like the other stuff I was talking about.
Right.
If these companies were so sure-footed, if Biden was so sure-footed,
say that quickly.
Yeah,
right.
exactly. You would have just an incredible amount of transparency, right? To
Exactly.
disprove all the claims.
Yes.
Instead, they
And-
try to shut things down.
Exactly. No, they apparently democracy lives in opacity. That would be their mantra. And the news hook, the impetus for me to write this was when I saw Maricopa County, which is an absolutely critical county in this election, by far the largest county in Arizona, where Phoenix is. Maricopa County is defying a very legal and proper subpoena for voter information from the Arizona State Senate. They claim that there's a privacy issue here. Now, Raheem, voter data is not private, all right, by definition, by law,
right.
by necessity, right? It has to be public. We have to know who is registered where, for integrity of the entire voting system. So there's no privacy claim here. So when I saw that, I said it's fascinating. And by the way, Republicans on the Maricopa County Board voted against or voted in favor of defying the subpoena. And unfortunately, we've seen a lot of squish Republicans, including that Governor Ducey, act, I think, in reprehensible ways. So it made me think, why are they fighting transparency? And it made me think, too, that if Joe Biden actually believes that he legally won, if he believes that he won the legal vote, albeit by razor-thin margins in these swing states, but if he believes that, wouldn't he want to remove this enormous cloud of doubt? Because as it stands right now, if he does take office on January 20th, and I don't believe he should because I don't believe he won the legal vote, but if he is sworn in on January 20th, he will be, Raheem, the most doubted new president in American history. And that's not my opinion, okay? Monmouth polling tells us 77% of Trump voters say that he won through fraud. CNBC survey says only 3% of Trump voters believe that the president should concede to Joe Biden. And then when you, on top of that, on top of all this suspicion, and I think very valid suspicion around the election, when you then on top of that layer all of the suspicion, another massive dark cloud, and that is the Biden Chinese Communist Party payoff scandal, this president, this potential president, would enter office as the weakest, least legitimate, most hobbled new chief executive of the United States in all of our history.
I looked at that Monmouth poll, and we actually have the data inside the article as well, pulled out that specific 77% that you were talking about. That was back in November.
Right.
And more people are actually being convinced of the truth. I mean, there's all these websites now that there weren't back then, everylegalvote.com,
right.
here is the evidence.com. You know, people continue to report, and new findings keep coming out as well. You know, Peter Navarro's latest report is epic, and I know you know a few things about that as well. But that 77% is growing. So when you talk about the illegitimacy, whether it's perceived or real, the illegitimacy factor is going to make this president the least legitimate president in modern history.
And Peter Navarro, in his just superb report, which I highly recommend that everybody read, it's not long, and even though he's an economist, it's written for the layman. It's full of citations. I mean, in a sense, it's very academic, but it's written for the layman. He says in that report that we have the potential of swearing into office an illegal and illegitimate president, and I believe that is the case. But here's the thing. Joe Biden has it within his power, and this is the point of my op-ed, he has it within his power to clear the air on both of these subjects, on the Chinese Communist Party pay-to-play Biden cartel scandal, as well as the election. And it's actually relatively easy, Raheem. So if he would actually join the Trump campaign, okay, and say, you know what, Maricopa County, you should provide all the data. By the way, it should be provided anyway.
Right.
We've got a crazy system in most counties in America, Raheem, where the data for a November election is released in January and February. Now, there's no valid reason for that delay. They have the data, okay? They have the data on election day, on the day after. But in most cases, it's released later. It needs to be released now. It needs to be in the public domain. And here's why. Because we can then take advantage of crowdsourcing. And what I mean by that is we would effectively turn thousands and even millions of Americans into investigators, right? And we would find out very, very quickly. For example, I've cast enormous doubt on Milwaukee's 84% voter turnout. I do not believe it. It doesn't match historical precedent. It has no connection to similar cities like Cleveland, which had 51% turnout. I frankly don't believe it. But here's the way that Milwaukee can prove that there was 84% turnout, is make public every single person, the name, the address, the age, all the stuff that is in the voter rolls, which will be released eventually. But my point is, Raheem, release it right now. And I will be the first to say, I think this is important for those of us in the America First movement and Trump supporters. I will be the first to say, if I am proven wrong, I will admit it. Okay, I will say, we're not asking for a predetermined outcome. Okay, if we actually lost these states by these registered margins and the data prove it, then we have to accept it as patriotic Americans. Sure. Now, I do not believe that's the case, but the point is, we'll only know through transparency. And Joe Biden, most of all, should yearn for transparency. He should want to enter office with a mandate rather than these twin dark clouds.
I mean, outside a question here, it's not the natural follow-up, but does he want to enter office?
Well, who knows? And listen,
he called himself the transition candidate.
Right. And most Americans, unfortunately, and according to Media Research Center polling 45% of Biden voters, most Americans either weren't aware of the China pay-to-play scandal at all, or they were just in a very cursory way aware of it. As that awareness grows, right, suspicion of him grows massively of Joe Biden. I don't believe if he is sworn in that he will last for very long, given the gravity of what he and his family, the big guy, given what they were up to with the most dire enemy of the United States.
I mean, we'll talk about this after the break. Look at the way the Hunter Biden hard drive from hell China story is proliferating around media circles and DC circles at the moment. You think it's the Republicans driving that? No, that's coming from within the Democratic Party now. We'll be right back to discuss that after this break. Welcome back to the National Pulse. Joining us in studio, Steve Cortes, Senior Advisor for the Trump campaign. And indeed, the campaign and the show does go on, Steve. Right. I mean, there is so much. You mentioned the Navarro report, and I know you're really honing in on some of the things that are coming out of that. We had Peter Navarro on the, sorry, I should say Dr. Peter Navarro on the, like we have to say Dr. Jill Biden,
right.
On the War Room this morning to walk us through. He's adding Michigan to the report as well and his findings in Michigan. I had a team of people that I was connected with immediately after the election who put out this report that called 200,000 votes into question in Michigan. Dr. Navarro, I know, is talking about 379,000 votes, and I've actually been through, I don't know if he's even released it yet, but I've been through the methodology on that, and it's perfectly sound to me. Just very quickly, before we get back into that, to my previous point, before we went to break, these stories don't get pushed around D.C. by Republicans. Right. Believe me, you know, the right tried, you know, to push that story around. Nobody wanted to hear about it. I won't say who. I had left-wing, or at least reporters who work for left-wing outlets, come and look at the laptop themselves and go through it themselves and go, oh my goodness, this is insane. My editor will never let me run with it. Right. And of course they never did. But it's Democrats. These are progressive Democrats who are pushing this story back around again, because guess what? They don't want Joe Biden. They want
President Kamala Harris, right, clearly. And by the way, to that point, because I think this is really important, you talk about how so-called journalists came and inspected the hard drive, knew that it was real. One of the most frustrating experiences, the most frustrating experience of the Trump campaign was trying to get the media to cover the most significant blockbuster story of the campaign, which they would not. And one of the things that we did, particularly for me, because I'm in communications in the comms world, is I got on the phone with most of these reporters, and I won't say who, because these conversations were on background, but brand name people, okay, that the audience would know. And I would lead them through the logic of who is the big guy, right? And I would get many of them to actually admit, yes, the big guy has to be Joe Biden, right? Or at least there's no other reasonable explanation at this point. And we're owed an explanation if it is not Joe Biden. You know, was he getting 10% at least? And in one place, his son says he's getting 50% of the deals. In one place, he says 10%, somewhere in that range of these dirty money Chinese Communist Party deals. I would get them to admit privately to me, Raheem, that they knew that he was likely the big guy. And then I would say, will you report on it? No. No, just so the level of obfuscation, the level of dishonesty has reached a crisis, quite frankly. I mean, there's a crisis. And again, the primary near-term cloud that's hanging over Biden is whether or not the election was legitimate. And again, I believe the statistical and constitutional case is compelling that it was not, and that Donald Trump won the legal vote. But then you have this also extenuating additional dark cloud hanging over a potential Biden administration of the China scandal. And I believe if he is sworn in, I believe it will force him from office relatively quickly, because this is the most damning scandal perhaps in American political history. We could have behind the resolute desk in the Oval Office a man who is literally compromised by the most dangerous adversary of the United States in the world.
Do we sound a bit like the Russia lie peddlers after the last election? I mean, that's what they said about Trump. If he gets to take, you know, the seat in the Oval Office, sit behind the resolute desk, he'll have Vladimir Putin on the phone and be saying, yes, sir, no, sir, 3 bags full, sir. Right. So what separates us from them?
No, it's a great question, and I understand that comparison, of course. Here's the difference. We have receipts. The Senate Homeland Security Committee has wire transfers, okay? These are not made up, right? We know that $5 million from the Chinese Communist Party, from CEFC, which is a Chinese Communist Party-controlled energy conglomerate, $5 million went to Hunter Biden. We know that $6 million went to, I call him the $6 million man, went to Rob Walker, very close associate of the Biden family. So we don't have to guess about this. We know that millions of dollars went from Moscow, from very shady oligarch figures in Moscow, to the what I call the Biden cartel. We have receipts for these. In addition to that, we have the laptop from hell. And in addition to that, we have highly credible first-hand eyewitness testimony from Tony Bobulinski. So unlike the Russia smear, which was based on innuendo and chasing ghosts, right? This is real with receipts.
And it was based on opposition dossiers that were you know, first put together by an anti-Trump on the Republican side, donor Paul Singer, and then afterwards by the Hillary Clinton campaign, commissioning Fusion GPS, Christopher Steele, to put these reports together. What we're talking about didn't come around that way. It came about in raw form. I mean,
Right.
literally in some of these cases, audio of Hunter Biden himself talking about Patrick Ho, the effing Chinese spy chief.
No, it's a great point. This has come from private. So think of that. Think of what the Democrats were able to do with the ludicrous Russian dossier. They were able to use partisan players to effectively co-opt the national security apparatuses of the United States to do their bidding with all the vast powers of those agencies. It's really fascinating and dreadful, right, when you think about it. And the opposite here, right, when the FBI should be all over this, and now we do know now that there are open investigations, but when they should have been all over it during the campaign. Instead, what we had were a lot of private parties, people like you, people like Jack Maxey, Rudy Giuliani, a lot of just patriots as private citizens chasing down this story and thankfully getting the truth to as many people as possible before the election. Many more are learning the truth now. It's a shame they didn't learn it earlier, but it's obviously better late than never. And it's one of the reasons, again, though, that Joe Biden, if he is sworn in, will be the least legitimate, most doubted president in American history. By the way, here's the way for him to clear the air there. You know, I said on voting, transparency is the way for him out of it, right? Let's release all voter rolls, all voter data immediately.
Right, in your thing, sunlight.
On the China issue, he should actually agree to a special counsel.
Yeah.
If he were to come forth and say, you know what, we have nothing to hide. These were appropriate business relationships that my son was involved in. I was not part of it. I was not the big guy. Have a special counsel.
Two questions real quick. Real quick. We've got 60 seconds. Why didn't Bill Barr do his job? And number two, should the President of the United States, Donald J. Trump, appoint a special counsel?
Regarding Barr, I have no idea, but it's insanely disappointing and good riddance. And his press conference today, I thought, was just was reprehensible, quite frankly. Just a dereliction of duty. I have no idea the motivations. I wish I knew. It's mystifying to me. Regarding your second question, yes, absolutely. Donald Trump, I think there should be two special counsels, one for the election, fraud in the election, and one for the Biden scandal. Absolutely.
Do you think he will?
I do.
Steve Cortez, where can people follow you?
At Cortez Steve on social. That's on Twitter. Cortez with an S. On Parler, I have my name in the right order. Steve Cortez.
Always a pleasure. Thank you so much for joining us here today.
Thank you, Raheem.
All right, when we come back, we'll talk to Thomas Farnan, the author of The Russia Lie, and he had this amazing article about Bill Barr, the banality of Bill Barr, up on thenationalpulse.com. You've got a break coming up. You could head over there, check it out. Natalie Winters will also join us. We've got some latest breaking news. Yes, about the Chinese Communist Party, the deployment of the Wu Mao 50-cent army. Remember we talked about that a year ago? We'll be right back. All right, welcome back to the National Pulse. Natalie Winters is in studio looking like she's going to be on Strictly Come Dancing. What do you call it? Dancing with the Stars? You know, they wear those dresses and they do the dances and all that kind of. I'm just trying to be culturally relevant. Isn't that what you kids are into nowadays?
No.
I want to bring Thomas Farnan in, author of The Russia Lie. Wrote this extraordinary article this weekend for thenationalpulse.com. Don't roll your eyes, Tom. You know, I know you're bad at taking compliments, but you know, you just got to accept them sometimes. I'm really great at accepting compliments, by the way. So it's called The Banality of Bill Barr, and this morning Bill Barr taught us just how banal he is. Tom, why don't you open us up with what's in the article and what you thought of this morning?
Yeah, in the article I said that Bill Barr serves the idiosyncratic preferences of the Washington establishment and not the 75 million people that put Trump in office. And I think this morning we just saw very much more of that. That's what Bill Barr does. That's who he is. He's a creature of Washington. When he got out of college, he worked for the CIA for 6 years. He made his way up into the Bush administration. He's made a lot of money as a lawyer in Washington. And he only represented Donald Trump because you know, he had this theory that Trump can't be liable for collusion or for obstruction, and it's obvious that he could.
On that point, I mean, a lot of people watched as Bill Barr made his interventions in that, but in that point, really what he was defending is the office of the president, not Donald Trump, right? And that's why when it comes to something that I think is a little bit more to do with Trump himself, or at least Trump as a candidate, Bill Barr is not so interested. So when it comes to the election, when it comes to the hard drive from hell, Bill Barr just sort of turned his back on America.
Yeah, and you know, the amazing thing was in June, he said mail-in voting is going to lead to fraud. What did he do about that? Where was the investigation by the Justice Department into the fraud that would happen with mail-in voting? It didn't happen. Instead, he invested non-existent white supremacist groups that would influence the election. And that's what you have with a guy like Bill Barr. And that's pretty much what I said in my article.
You have coined a new word, or at least a portmanteau of the Attorney General, Bill Barr. So what is a Bill Barr?
A Bill Barr is a Republican politician or appointee who doesn't do his job because he's afraid of the criticism that will come from it, and someone who will be celebrated for not doing his job. And that is what Bill Barr is. There's many of them, but let's stop here. Let's take this person and let's put a word on that thing that these 75 million that voted for Trump know exists out there, but we have no word for it. A Bill Barr is someone who is appointed and doesn't do their job.
That's B-I-L-B-A-R, all one word, a Bill Barr. And I really like it, not least because I think, you know, the catch-all phrase or term rhino is become a little bit stale, a little bit passé. It doesn't necessarily, it might be a great catch-all umbrella term, but it doesn't really get down to the detail of what you're talking about. It's somebody who is kind of the swamp in and of themselves, or, you know, only sort of curates their interest in or around things that further the cause of the political and especially the Washington, D.C. establishment. We want to make sure that for the audience at home, we get the screen up. If we can, the article is The Banality of Bill Barr. Mr. Producers, in your own good time, thank you very much. And you can go through it and go through exactly what Thomas Farnan is talking about here, what Barr could have done, talking about how he represents that typical Washington creature. There he is pictured with Joe Biden, who talked about how wonderful an AG he was when he previously served in that regard. The shill continues, the hard drive from hell. There is the hard drive, by the way. That was what my copy of the hard drive looked like. The audience members who were watching back then when we broke all those stories will remember. We carried it around with us in person. That's a slightly artistic picture. I've put a few tweaks on that. That was actually on the Morton's Terrace that hard drive was there. And then, of course, back to the Russia lie. So, Tom, now what? As per your next headline on there, now what?
I don't think these 75 million are going anywhere. Republicans too often take a guy like Bill Barr and we celebrate him. He already did his valedictory interview at the Wall Street Journal, and he's presenting it like he had a struggle with big issues, but he gave it his best. And that's not true. And I think we have to say that. I think we have to stop putting these people on a pedestal. You know, in my office in Pittsburgh, if I drew a quarter-mile circle around me, I could name 200 lawyers with better credentials that would have done a better job than Bill Barr, that would have been more presentable, you know, in a face-to-face meeting. I don't know why we have to keep picking these guys from Washington. And in the next Trump administration, I think Donald Trump has to go to Ohio, go to Pennsylvania, go to West Virginia, where I'm sitting in a cabin right here for a Christmas celebration, and pick people there, because those people will be loyal to him and loyal to the cause. And all that Bill Barr is loyal to is his friends in Washington. And that's what my article says.
I think that's right. Hey, Thomas, just tell us, where can the audience follow you? Your articles do fantastic every time they're on the site. I'm sure they want to follow your social media feed too.
I'm on Twitter at T. Farnan Law, and I'm also on Parler at T. Farnan Law. All
right. Well, you enjoy the cabin in the woods. We'll come back to you soon, Thomas Farnan. Always a pleasure. Thank you for your article, and thanks for being here today.
Thank you, Raheem.
All right, well, when we come back, we're going to walk you through some of the things that are being reported now that we reported on about a year ago. The Wu Mao, the 50-cent army, Chinese Communist Party, the coronavirus. Obviously, we've got this new strain in the United Kingdom shutting things down all over again. It's Groundhog Day, but worse. I suppose that doesn't make it Groundhog Day. It's a worse day in the United Kingdom now as new Tier 4 lockdowns come into place. They've also found that mutation here in the United States, in Brazil also, and beyond. We'll get into all of that in the next couple of segments. Natalie Winters in the studio. Stick around. We'll be right back. ProPublica is not exactly a right-wing news organization, nor is the New York Times, and yet they have a story up right now that I was going to say could have come straight from my mouth, but it did. It was in March, I think, earlier this year, where we talked about the 50-cent Wu Mao army. Now, that's not the rapper, 50 Cent, is it? No. Thank you for confirming that. Let's go to the laptop here in front of me. Let's just take a look at ProPublica's reporting on this. Leaked documents show how China's army of paid internet trolls helped censor the coronavirus. As the coronavirus spread in China, the government stage managed what appeared on the domestic internet to make the virus look less severe and the authorities more capable, according to thousands of leaked directives and other files. Let's remind ourselves of the war room from March. I think it was March. Was it March?
March 19th.
March 19th. Do we have that clip? Can we roll that clip from the war room to the producers?
They're called the Wu Mao Army, the 50-cent army. It's not named after the rapper. It's named after how much they're proposed to be paid per post, 50 cents per post that promotes China's interest. And typically, it has been a very sort of positive outreach army of real people. These are not bots. These are not Russian algorithms that we're talking about here. These are real human beings. The scale of this thing is thought to be anywhere up to 2 million people that have access to this sort of Wu Mao.
Hold on, hang on a second. This is not positive. I mean, they go after Miles Grow, they go after me. They target people that stand up to the Chinese Communist Party and call them gangsters and call them devils and say they got to be taken down, they got to be taken out. If they're not taken out, they're going to destroy not just the Chinese people.
Yes.
Hey, they may put a positive spin, but trust me, the Wu Mao 50-cent army, they target those people, those voices. Maura Monahan, the Falun Gong, the Epic Times, the Tibetan Buddhists, the East Turkestan, the Mongolians, the underground Christians, the underground Catholic Church. If you stand up for religious freedom or any freedom against the Chinese Communist Party, you are targeted by these people in a global information war. And now it's finally coming out because of this crisis we've got.
That's exactly what I was about to say. It started in around 2014. You started seeing them pushing like positive messages about China. That's now shifted. It's now an attack army. It targets people. It targets individuals. I've been targeted. Friends of mine have been targeted. Jack Posobiec, who joined us on the first War and Pandemic show, has been personally targeted.
Yep.
Well, the hair is a lot longer on Steve, but the interrupting hasn't changed. I want to turn now to Natalie Winters here in studio with us in your Dancing with the Stars ensemble. This was a surprise, I guess, to see the New York Times talking about this. But then last week, you had CNN go, oh, well, you know, the CCP covered up the virus the whole time and finally getting on board with that stuff. So I guess we were right all along, and over the last year we've been kicked off how many platforms in the meantime? I mean, where is my remedy, by the way? You know, Dominion and Smartmatic can send snarky legal emails to Newsmax and Fox News, and they just cower back into themselves like little scared little turtles, right? But our business has been harmed as a result of the media calling us fake news and the social media companies taking us offline. and then they come out nearly a year later and go, hey, well, actually, you know, they were telling the truth. It just wasn't a truth that we were willing to tell you back then.
Well, I'm sure the Chinese Communist Party is relishing in the fact that the National Pulse is struggling, but you're definitely
not struggling that much.
Not that much, but you are definitely correct in that it's surprising for these outlets, these vessels, to be carrying the story, but the story itself, right? The Chinese Communist Party engaging in information warfare, frankly, disinformation warfare, comes as no surprise to me, really, to anyone. So what this ProPublica story, again, it's in tandem with the New York Times, details is how, following a whistleblower complaint, so this was a doctor who had basically been exposed to coronavirus and tried to alert his fellow health professionals, nurses, doctors, that something was up, there was a disease. He felt it could have been a new strain, a novel strain of coronavirus. The Chinese Communist Party saw how around him a large community of people online really mobilized and really held the Chinese Communist Party their feet to the fire, in the sense that they were like, what is going on here? So in response to that, the Cyberspace Administration, which was a body that was formed in 2014, really cracked down, whether it was limiting any story that had to deal with coronavirus. They told news outlets that they couldn't use certain words in headlines when they were talking about lockdowns or remedies to control the spread of the virus. They also penetrated and really got into social media communities, whether it was WeChat or other networks that we've long identified as having extensive links to the Chinese Communist Party, saying that if you want to post about the virus, if you want to post about the disease, you can't say these certain things. Again, even really telling every single news outlet, which is interesting now when you go back retrospectively, you can kind of see a uniformity in the headlines and the reporting that they were doing, using certain words to describe the measures, to describe the severity of the coronavirus, which again, this is all happening concurrently with the Chinese Communist Party withholding information about the virus from the World Health Organization. You see leaked documents essentially from this government body detailing everything I just outlined, specific words people could and couldn't use, what to cover, what not to cover. So as I said, really disinformation warfare at its finest.
And disinformation warfare at its finest from the Chinese Communist Party, but also disinformation warfare from the political left media in this country as well. I mean, they took the Chinese Communist Party line probably because they were looking at China's state reporting and reporting that was impacted by this Wu Mao army.
Yeah, they were essentially the Chinese Communist Party's useful idiots for the last year. There's an interesting story. I believe it was CNN who actually cross-posted verbatim a story from Global Times, which is a Chinese state-run media outlet, and it was talking about how the Chinese military was combating coronavirus and doing such an excellent job. Meanwhile, the U.S. Navy was doing nothing, and U.S. efforts to curtail the virus were falling short. Later, they revised because they realized they were quite literally pushing the state line coming from the Chinese Communist Party, but you can see archived versions of the site cross-posting from the Global Times.
And it's interesting, isn't it, that that's their first instinct. CNN's first instinct is to take the copy from the Chinese Communist Party. The New York Times, ProPublica, all these organizations that tell you that they're really interested in doing the news and journalism, and democracy dies in darkness. These are the ones that have been hiding the details. We'll be back with more. As Ingrid just did, I don't know who you are, Ingrid, but thank you. It's thenationalpulse.com/support. Oh, you can go to fundrealnews.com as well. We don't have any big corporate backing. I don't want big corporate backing. I don't even want money from the Republican mega donors, because then you have to do and report what they tell you. And I am far too hard-headed for that. I don't want Heritage's money. I don't want the old Rhino and RNC, and we'll talk about the RNC and how useful it is in just a second. So going over to thenationalpulse.com/support, if you will, please. I put up a little new QR code there as well. I wonder if you can scan that on your televisions. Get your camera out. Like, I'm going to do it right here as well. Get your camera out and see if you can scan that QR code on the television in front of you. If you do, it will take you directly to the website, and you can do everything there. Oh, there we go. We got it full screen, so maybe that will work better. Just bring your camera up, point it at that little crazy circle there. I promise you, it's safe. It just brings up a URL, a website. and you can sign up. All right, let's go to how useless the RNC is. We'll start with OK White Boy. That is this this article up on the National Pulse right now. Natalie Winters, you discovered. Oh, why don't you tell us what you discovered?
Well, I was going through a lot of staff members for John Ossoff's Senate race for his campaign. And,
in Georgia?
Yes, in Georgia. And interestingly enough, his digital director, deputy digital director, she's also an alum of the Joe Biden campaign, serving as his digital organizing associate. Her name is Kiana O'Neill. Had a lot of old tweets that were could be easily be described as anti-white, anti-Asian.
Pretty racist. Let's be very clear.
Yeah.
This is racism.
Yeah, certainly. She speaks out effectively against interracial dating. You can see on the piece it's scrolling now, but some of the most egregious tweets include all these black women in Atlanta, and you pick a white one, SMH, 5 black people, but he's with a white woman. Since we published this piece, it gained a lot of traction. She's since locked her account, turning it private, but I don't know about you, I haven't seen any comments or statements from her boss from the campaign, and her bio is still the same, meaning that she's still with the campaign. One could only imagine if she had worked for Kelly Loeffler or any other candidate, and she was a different race, what the ramifications would have been, or repercussions.
Well, that's the point, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's a twofer. Number one, she's a Democrat, so no local media organization is going to approach the campaign and say, hey, do you have a comment on your racist digital director? And number two, it's the wrong race, right? Mm-hmm. She's attacking white people, which you're allowed to do, right? Mm-hmm. That's the race that, you know, shouldn't get the vaccine, you know, all of that we've been hearing about. So you say, though, she locked her account, which means that she's seen the story. And I think her boyfriend has seen the story as well.
Well, I was going to say, I can independently verify that she has indeed seen the story. I received a rather rude message from her boyfriend. He called me trash for unearthing the tweets, saying that she was very young when she had authored the tweets. I say she's old enough to drive. I think she's old enough to probably know better when the tweets came out, but nonetheless, he thought that, you know, they didn't count because they were from so long ago.
She wasn't that much younger than you.
No, she was.
Now.
Yeah.
Back then.
Exactly. No, she
so
was.
if you know.
I know.
Then
I don't even have my driver's license. Yeah, and she knows. But interestingly enough, too, it's not even just that she attacked white people. She also had a lot of just unnecessarily race-focused tweets about Asian people.
Yeah, what was that about?
Yeah,
obsessed with Asians. Let's put it up on screen here. Obsessed with Asians.
Just kind of bizarre tweets. Yeah, as you said, definitely a double
let me read some of them.
Sure.
Let me read some of these. Kiana O'Neill's tweets. Sorry, Kiana O'Neill's boyfriend who's watching this, and I know you're very upset that we've actually covered the news. I'm trash as well, by the way. Quote, I wish I had an app where I could record what these Asian in English. LMAO, Lindsay Monica just hoed this Asian boy. Lol, we asked this guy named Chin Lee to sit at our table, all blacks and an Asian. This dude in my class has huge lips for an Asian. Lol. You can laugh. Look, can we get a close-up of Natalie just cracking up? I mean, she's nuts. She's nuts. She's a racist and she's nuts.
I just also think the funnier layer here, too, is that she's the digital director. You would think that she would know to either A, not tweet this stuff, or B, scrub it and delete it.
Fine. And didn't Team Biden or Team Ossoff check their digital director's history of tweets?
Yeah, what's the vetting process? To me, this means that they've probably seen it and they just don't care.
Let's move on quickly. We've got about 2 minutes left here. I want to move on to
more serious.
Yeah, this Zoom story. Now, there's been a lot of innuendo out there about Zoom, and it appears that every time you talk about a company now, you get a nasty legal letter. So feel free, Zoom, if you're watching, which you always are, apparently. Employs Chinese Communist Party and Huawei techies. Tell us more.
Yeah, well, this is just coming on the heels of a similar piece we had about YouTube, but essentially following a Zoom Chinese official or executive getting I think it was a warrant for his arrest for censoring content and videos that were against Chinese Communist Party narratives on the Tiananmen Square massacre. I dug down to see who really is creating the software at this company, and lo and behold, you see former techies from Huawei, which again has been labeled as a military collaborator on behalf of the Chinese Communist Party and a national security threat by the Trump administration. People who formerly worked at Alibaba, which again is a Chinese Communist Party linked, if not owned, company. And probably the scariest is that an individual who worked for China Telecom, which is another Chinese military proxy. Also, he worked on behalf of the Chinese Communist Party as an official. He also is their head of regulatory and government affairs.
Thank you, Natalie Winters.
You're welcome.
All the stories are up there at thenationalpulse.com. Real reporting, real news, real investigations. Cost money. We don't have a lot of it.
50 cents.
It costs 50 cents. No, it costs a little bit more than 50 cents. It costs more than Wumao. Head on over to thenationalpulse.com/support. I thank you for tuning in. I thank you for sharing this. If you're watching it after the fact and not live, make sure you hit those share buttons. Follow us across social media platforms. I'm at Raheem Kassam on most of them. Natalie is at Natalie G. Winters. And to those of you who are members, we'll see you in the live chat, in the private chat. And see you tomorrow at 3 p.m.